I often use exercise and health as examples because it's something that most people can relate to and understand. Most people would know what it means to be somewhat part of an exercise program, even if it's just something like walking. However, sometimes we fail to understand how these concepts transfer to character development or Stoicism. We have a goal. The goal in Stoicism is become virtuous so that we can flourish. We then have to determine, to the best of our wisdom, where we currently are. Then we have to make a plan, to the best of our wisdom, on how to get us from where we are to where we want to go. In other words, we aim up in Stoicism towards virtue as high as we can possibly imagine. That's basically the sage. That question can be a hard one to answer though, but fortunately we have a long history of human civilization and they've dissected really the best ways of life, generally speaking. Buddhism, Stoicism, Christianity, these are pretty good ideas of what it means to live a good life. We also have a pretty good idea of what our plans should be because of that as well, developing virtuous habits. So in Stoicism, of course, you know the cardinal virtues and the virtuous habits and actions that go along with that. The hardest question to answer when we're talking about something like philosophy as a way of life is knowing where we are right now. This is part of the cardinal virtue of wisdom. It's know thyself. Wisdom also includes the best plan, knowing the best plan to put in place to get you from where you are to where you want to go. That's why wisdom is the key virtue in Stoicism, because it is, without wisdom, you don't know where you are and you don't know how to get from where you are to where you want to go. So you need both of those in order to improve, in order to move towards excellence and virtue. And this is where Stoic quote sin comes in. I'm going to use that term really loosely here, but try and detach the word sin from supernatural God. Try and think of sin as just you're missing the mark. You're making mistakes. There's error here. You're aiming up, but you're failing. Stoic quote sin is when we miss the mark on virtue despite our aiming towards it. It's deciding that you want to go to the gym every day only to find yourself being too lazy to go one day and you stay on the couch. That's sin, in the Stoic sense. However, it's also missing the mark on answering that most difficult question. Where are we right now? In one phrase, we could say that knowing where we are right now on our self-improvement journey, on our philosopher's journey, is knowing the truth about ourselves. That's what it is. Truth. Where are we? Who are we right now? What truth is that? It's the good, it's the bad, it's the ugly. Let's start with the good. Many of us fail to recognize our own virtues. Are you a good friend? Even sometimes. Do you show up to work every day or most days? Do you eat healthily? At least sometimes. Do you say your please and thank yous? If you struggle with recognizing your own good, have a look back at where you were 2 years ago, and then 5 years ago, and then 10 years ago, and just look at how far you've come. It's a very useful thing to do. We can get caught up sometimes too much in looking at yesterday or the week before, or 2 weeks before. What about 2 years? What about 10 years? How far have you come? What virtues, which virtues have you developed? Which habits have you developed that make you, at least, moving towards virtue? And now the bad and the ugly, which I've spoken about quite a bit. This is the shadow, this is the not so lovely parts of you, this is the underground man that's within you. Sometimes we are aware of our own insufficiencies. Other times we are completely oblivious. For example, you may be very aware of when you skip the gym. That's a pretty obvious one, right? I skipped the gym, I missed the mark, I sinned. However, maybe you're completely oblivious to the fact that when you come home from work, you take the stress of your day out on your spouse. How many of the things that you are doing in your day-to-day life are not virtuous, yet your ego is not letting you see them for fear of ego death? It's a really hard question to answer. One of the best mechanisms for learning these things are other people, loved ones and friends that are willing to tell you the truth about yourself. Say, listen, you got some dead wood here. We should probably burn that away. Listen, there's a part of you here that's not developed. You could do better here. You should do better here. That's what your friends and loved ones say. But that truth is often very painful to hear and confront. And you can also learn these things, by the way, through deep philosophical reflection, journaling, that sort of stuff, or by the consequences of your actions in the real world. For example, if you think you're doing great at work and then you get fired, well, that's a consequence of your actions. So even though you think you're doing great, it turns out that not so much. That's that ego death that occurs where you have a plan based on where you think you are, but then you get fired and you realize that you're not even close to where you think you are.